Listen closely to the shift already moving inside your field, because what you're feeling now is not confusion or sudden emotion, but the first signal of a deep rearrangement happening in the core of your energy. Whenever a major change is approaching, the soul always sends signals before the mind notices. And the first part of this journey begins the moment you realize that you no longer stand in the same place within yourself. There is a very specific sensation that appears when a new timeline is about to open. Not excitement, not anticipation, but a compressed stillness rising inside you, the same way the air changes a few seconds before the sky turns to rain. You cannot see it, but your body knows. Every small sign unfolding around you is not coincidence. The song repeating in your day, the person you unexpectedly meet again, the thought that arrives out of nowhere and stops you for a moment. They are all carrying the same message, that something is calling you back to yourself, not to a better version, but to the version untouched by fear and expectation. When a new phase prepares to reveal itself, reality sends signals through the smallest shifts in the energy surrounding you. You struggle to focus on familiar things. You look at your old life and it feels like it has drifted out of your frequency. You move in the same rooms but feel like a stranger to the life you once lived. This is not confusion. It is the sign of separation from a timeline that has already ended. Because before you enter a new reality, the soul pulls you away from everything no longer aligned so that you can feel the space. And from that space, your body begins to receive new information. You may feel tired without reason because your nervous system is releasing expired codes. You may lose interest in things that once excited you because your energy is withdrawing from structures that no longer hold truth for you. You may feel lonely even when surrounded by people because the soul is removing you from noise so that you can hear your own signal. This is the most sensitive stage of awakening because everything begins inside long before the physical world catches up. You feel first, then you see, first, then life responds. Inner frequency always precedes matter, and right now you are sensing a shift that lies beyond logic or the familiar patterns you once relied on. Nothing is wrong with you when you no longer fit into the environment you used to understand. The mismatch is proof that you are being pulled toward your true frequency. The way an instrument slightly out of tune begins to vibrate when the original note is played somewhere in the distance, your body is vibrating in the same way, not loudly but undeniably, not dramatically but deep into the bones. As your truth begins to rise, anything not aligned with it becomes heavy. Empty conversations drain you, connections built on effort exhaust you, roles that once gave you safety now feel small and impossible to carry. This is not emotional instability, but the process of energetic shedding, the quiet removal of every layer that is not you. And in this shedding, you begin to hear a subtle but steady sound, like the heartbeat of your soul calling you back to a point you once forgot, but that never forgot you. This is the moment you recognize that change is not coming, it has already begun. The body senses it, the mind feels it, the soul leads it. You are standing at the threshold between a version that has completed its purpose and a version being activated, and everything you feel now is not chaos but coordinates being delivered into your system. The beginning of this journey does not ask you to act, it only asks you to notice. Notice that you no longer belong to the old frequency. Notice that the silence growing inside you is the truest voice you have ever heard. Notice that separation is not loss but the first step of return. When you accept that you are changing from within, everything begins to align, every signal becomes clear, every empty space becomes meaningful. This is the first page of your return, and you are standing exactly where you are meant to stand at the exact moment your soul chose for you. There are moments when you begin to notice that the coincidences around you are becoming too dense to ignore, as if some form of intelligence is communicating directly with you through the smallest details of your everyday life. You hear an old song At the exact moment you are thinking about something you have never spoken aloud, you stumble upon a sentence online that makes your entire being pause. You open a book you only meant to skim, and it falls open to the exact page containing the answer you did not know you were looking for. Most people would call this random luck, but deep inside you there is a very clear sense that none of this is random, that these are signals of an interaction between your inner field and the external world. Whenever a new timeline is preparing to reveal itself, reality begins to communicate through synchronicity, because it is the fastest way to awaken the parts of you that have been asleep for far too long. Synchronicity is not just coincidence, it is the collision between two layers, the layer you think you are living in and the layer you are actually being guided toward. And when these two layers begin to overlap, you feel a strange vibration inside you, a knowing deeper than thought. You start noticing signs you would have ignored before, repeating images, numbers showing up at the perfect moment, words spoken by different people carrying the same message. These signals do not show up to impress you, they show up to confirm that you are not imagining anything, that you are truly being pulled out of an old reality and placed onto the path that aligns with your soul. One of the strongest signs of this process is the way time stops behaving normally. Days move quickly but feel heavy, as if each moment carries meaning you cannot fully name. Everything around you feels sharper, not visually but intuitively. You look at someone and sense their truth without them speaking. You walk into a room and immediately feel whether the energy fits your frequency or not. In the past, you could tolerate places that were not aligned with you, but during a frequency shift, the soul will not let you stay where you no longer belong. It is not discomfort, it is non-resonance, like a sound slightly out of tune, making your entire body unable to pretend any longer. And as synchronicity grows stronger, you begin to realize something important, that you are being guided not through words, but through a direct dialogue between intuition and reality. The guidance feels light like breath, but impossible to deny, as if something is holding you at the exact moment you think you might fall, as if a door opens the moment you believe you have reached the end. You find yourself returning to old memories, not to feel pain, but to retrieve pieces of yourself you abandoned, remembering small details that once seemed meaningless, but now feel spiritually heavy and significant. When reality begins speaking to you in this language, you are no longer in the middle of the journey, but in the phase where the soul takes direct control of the arrangement of your life. What you once called randomness becomes instruction. What you once called coincidence becomes a map. You begin to ask why you saw this sign at this exact moment, why that person appeared at that exact second, why the universe chose this way to pull your attention. The answer is simple: because you are ready to see, ready to hear, ready to recognize. Synchronicity never appears before you are ready. It only emerges when your inner field becomes sensitive enough to communicate back with reality. And when this happens, the soul will use every element of your life to tell you that you are on the right path and that you must keep walking a little further. This is the sign that you are returning to your true essence, because only when you reach this frequency does the universe begin to respond like a mirror. And when reality mirrors you in this way, you finally understand that the journey home is not about trying to find the way, but about allowing yourself to hear the signals that were always there, waiting for the moment you were awake enough to notice. You begin to notice something strange happening inside you. The things that once excited you no longer create any movement. The conversations that once made you feel connected now leave only an empty echo. The goals that once pushed you to stay up late and wake up early now feel distant, as if they belong to someone you are no longer becoming. This is not discouragement or loss of motivation. It is the cleansing of frequency, an inevitable stage when the soul is preparing to rise into a new layer. Before every rebirth, the old energy must leave the body, and it leaves by pulling your life force away from everything that has expired. You can no longer pretend to care. You cannot force yourself back into what used to feel familiar, and the more you try to hold on to old rhythms, the more your body resists. This happens because the soul always knows before the mind, and when the soul recognizes that a chapter has ended, it slowly withdraws its life force from all structures that no longer fit you. You feel as if you are stepping back from your own life, but in truth you are stepping back from everything that is not you. The roles you accepted because you thought you had to, the relationships you maintained out of fear of being alone, the decisions you made based on the expectations of others. This is the stage that confuses most people because you no longer belong to the old reality but have not fully entered the new one. You stand between dimensions, and that space can feel unstable. But this instability is proof that you are being removed from a frequency that has already closed. One of the clearest signs of this stage is the shift in how you react to things you once tolerated easily. What once brought you joy now feels hollow. Places that once felt comforting suddenly feel suffocating. People who once felt safe now make you feel unseen. It is not that they have changed, it is you who has changed. You are separating from the frequencies you once merged with in order to survive. You begin to see what was blurry before, the lack of sincerity in some conversations, the exhaustion in connections built on obligation, the falseness of roles you wore for so long you once believed they were you. And as these layers begin to fall away, you will feel a wide, empty space opening inside you, a space that makes you think you are losing everything, but you are only losing what was never yours. The emptiness is a signal of return, because only when the old structures fall away does the soul have room to pour new information into your system. You will find yourself more silent, speaking less, even withdrawing from the surface of life because your energy is turning inward, gathering, preparing for a level of expansion greater than anything you ever allowed yourself to imagine. This silence is not escape, it is retrieval, the way the ocean pulls back before a large wave arrives. You feel separate but not truly lonely because a deep inner knowing keeps telling you that this separation is necessary, that you can no longer attach yourself to anything that makes your soul shrink. The astonishing thing about frequency cleansing is that everything that once made you feel safe begins to shake. A job that once gave you stability now feels like wearing clothes too tight. A relationship you know well begins to drain your energy the moment you step into it. The hobbies that once revived you no longer bring life into your body. This happens because your deepest truth is rising, and anything that does not match that truth is naturally pushed to the edges. You cannot force yourself to return because each attempt to reconnect with the past feels like stepping backward into a reality that has already closed. When you move through this cleansing, you realize something important. That the emptiness inside you is not the sign of an ending, but the sign of a beginning. The beginning of a version you have not met yet, but that your soul knows intimately. Because before life brings you into the new chapter, it must remove everything you cling to that no longer aligns with your truth. And when you accept this clearing, even when it overwhelms you or frightens you, you begin to feel something strange, a lightness deep in your chest, as if your body finally has space to breathe. That space is the proof that you are moving in the right direction, that the soul is opening the path, that you are preparing to step into the frequency where the true return begins. There comes a moment when you begin to realize that the journey you are living is no longer a search for a new version of yourself, but a return to the one you have always been. A quiet but profoundly deep homecoming where the soul guides you inward to retrieve the parts of you that were abandoned in the past. You think you are losing something, but in truth you are being taken back to your origin, to the essence you were born with before life taught you to shrink in order to fit. The parts you forgot did not disappear. They have simply been waiting for the day you became awake enough to see them and brave enough to call them back. This is when old memories rise, not to hurt you, but to remind you that beneath the dust of time there are pieces of truth that still belong to you. hidden under expectations, judgments, and fears you learnt in order to survive. You remember a small passion that once lit up your eyes, a dream that once made your heart race, but you abandoned it to be praised, to be safe, to be accepted. You remember who you were before you feared being misunderstood, before you filtered every word, before you learned to restrain your own emotions. Each returning memory is like a door opening into a layer of truth you closed long ago. You may feel a tightness in your chest when you see how far you have drifted from your essence, how much you shaped yourself to match the outlines of others, how many parts of yourself you traded away for the sake of keeping your life stable on the surface. But the soul never gives up. It never stops calling you back. And as your frequency rises, all the forgotten fragments begin finding their way home. This is the stage of remembering who you were before you were taught to stay silent, to be loved, to behave, to be safe, to sacrifice, to avoid being abandoned. You realize your greatest strength was never in becoming a version good enough for someone else, but in returning to the parts you were made to believe were unworthy. When the retrieval begins, you are pulled towards small details that seem meaningless. An old song that brings back the feeling of a time when you had no fear. A sudden image that resurrects a quality you forgot you had. A scent that takes you directly to the moment you were still yourself. This is not nostalgia. It is energetic memory being activated, because everything that belongs to you leaves an imprint in your field, and when you are ready, it rises on its own to show you where you left yourself behind. You start seeing clearly the moments in your life when you abandon your truth to gain approval, the times you said things you did not believe just to avoid conflict, the times you stayed silent when you should have spoken because you feared being disliked, the times you dimmed your own light because you did not want to be a burden to anyone. These realizations are not meant to shame you, but to show you how long you have lived under a shell that was never yours. And that awareness opens the door to your return. When you look directly at the truth that you once traded yourself for belonging, you also see that your true self never left. It was only pushed down, covered in dust, silenced. You do not need to recreate yourself. You only need to release everything that is not you. What makes this return so breathtaking is that you do not find yourself out in the world. You find yourself by remembering that you were once braver, freer, able to live without measuring every gaze around you. And as you retrieve the lost pieces, you begin to see that everything you once called safety was a cage. Everything you once used for love was a contract that pulled you away from your essence. Retrieval is the real turning point, because the moment you take back what you sacrificed, your entire energy shifts. You see clearly that you do not need to trade yourself to stay in anyone's life, that you do not need to become any version to be worthy, that you do not need to bend yourself to keep the peace. You only need to be you. And when you stand in that center, the center of truth, of essence, of your original frequency, everything not meant for you naturally falls away, and everything meant for you finds its path back, like water returning to its source. This is the core of the homecoming, and it is the part no one can walk for you, because only you know where you lost yourself, and only you can call yourself back. There is a moment in the journey of returning when you are forced to walk down the steps you have avoided for years. The steps that lead into the darkest space within you, the place that holds everything you try to forget, bury, or lock away just to keep going. This is the part most people want to skip, but no one can complete this journey without entering the deepest layer of themselves. You cannot return to your original essence without facing the place where you first abandoned yourself. The void is not the terrifying darkness you imagine. The void is the space where every unprocessed memory remains, the emotions you swallowed, the words you wanted to speak but silenced, the tears you held back because you were afraid of being seen as weak. The void does not punish you. The void mirrors you, mirrors the parts you forgot, mirrors the truth you did not want to see, but that has been shaping your life from the inside. When you step into the void, the first sensation is not fear, but heaviness. Heaviness in the chest, heaviness in the throat, heaviness in the parts of the body that once held emotions you did not dare to touch. This heaviness is a sign that old energy layers are rising, the layers you suppressed with busyness, logic, and the performance of being strong. You may want to run, to turn back to familiar ground, but the truth is that the void has been calling you for a very long time, not to break you, but to free you. Inside the void you meet yourself again, but the version you left behind. The child who was silenced for speaking too much. The person who was mocked for being too creative. The self who was labeled too sensitive. All of them are there, waiting for you, not blaming you, not resentful, simply waiting to be acknowledged. The void is where you finally understand that you never lost yourself. You only abandoned yourself. And when you reclaim these parts, you begin to feel a healing that does not come from the outside, but from inner reunion. But the void is also where you face the wounds you denied, the sadness you never admitted because you thought it would make you weak, the anger you suppressed because you feared people would leave, the disappointment you buried to keep the peace, the loneliness you hid because you did not want to be seen as unstable. These emotions do not disappear with time. They gather into dense, energetic layers and quietly determine how you love, how you trust, how you defend yourself. Stepping into the void is stepping into the room that contains everything that was never spoken. This is the part where many people think they are falling backward, but they are actually moving deeper into the center of truth. You cannot build a new life on a cracked foundation, and the void is the place where you finally see the cracks, so you no longer have to pretend they are not there. You realize you are exhausted, not because life is too hard, but because you have been carrying too many versions of yourself that were never yours to hold. You realize you have been afraid, not because you are weak, but because you were never allowed to feel safe while being yourself. You realize that your self-doubt does not come from your essence, but from things you heard when you were too young to defend yourself. And in that recognition, you free yourself. The void does not break you, the void lightens you. Because each time you face an emotion, once buried, it loses its power over you. Each time you call back a silenced part, you no longer need to perform. Each time you look directly at the place where you once hurt, the pain stops being a shadow. The void is liberation, not destruction. And when you go deep enough into the void, something unexpected happens. A primal energy begins to rise, not the force strength you used to project, but a strength born from truth, as if you are rediscovering the spiritual backbone you dropped long ago. This is why facing the darkness always leads to rebirth, because when you look at your pain, instead of running from it, the pain returns to you the strength it once took. You enter the void to meet yourself, and you emerge with a frequency no mask could ever create. You emerge with a clarity no advice could ever grant. You emerge with a steadiness no circumstance could ever remove. This is why every true return goes through the void, because only in the darkness do you finally see the light waiting inside. You do not lose anything in the void. You only take back what has always been yours. When you step out of the void with eyes now accustomed to the darkness within you, begin to see a truth you once could not admit, that in order to enter a new chapter of your life, a part of the old one must fall apart. Not because you did anything wrong, but because the soul can no longer sustain structures built on fear, compromise, and the false versions of yourself you once wore in order to survive. Collapse is not a catastrophe, it is a release. And the hardest part is not the collapse itself, but the moment you recognize that you can no longer save what has already expired. You look at relationships that once held you together but now drain you until you feel empty. You look at a job that once gave you pride but now makes your body shrink the moment you think about it. You look at dreams you once believed were yours but now feel unfamiliar, as if you are watching the dreams of someone you no longer are. Everything that once framed your life begins to shake. not to break you, but to show you that you have outgrown the space you once lived in. As old energy withdraws from your system, you feel heavy in the body, foggy in the mind, unstable in your emotions, as if you are no longer standing on familiar ground but on shifting soil. But this instability is the confirmation that you are being moved out of an old frequency. Not all exhaustion means you are failing. Sometimes exhaustion is the way the soul forces you to stop, not to surrender, but to prevent you from pouring energy into what has completed its purpose. You may feel disconnected from everyday life, as if you are living in a room that was once warm but now lacks warmth. People you once resonated with begin to feel distant. Conversations that once felt alive now feel draining. Places that once felt like home now feel foreign. This is not a change in personality, it is a change in frequency. When frequency shifts, anything that does not match falls away naturally, like a piece of clothing you once adored but no longer fits, not because the clothing changed, but because you grew. Some relationships fall away, not because you did something wrong, but because you no longer match the version of you they were familiar with. They were used to the you who made yourself smaller, quieter, more controlled in order to fit. When you no longer shrink yourself to fit someone else's frame, they will feel you pull away, but in truth, you are simply returning to the true size of your soul. The collapse of what is no longer aligned is a subtle form of protection. It removes what blocks you before you have the courage to let it go. It strips away your interest in things that lower your energy. It takes away your patience for places that do not honor your truth. It makes it impossible to keep playing roles that require you to sacrifice yourself just to maintain harmony. Every resistance you feel in this stage is not coming from life, but from within you. The part of you clinging to the old, fighting with the part of you stepping into the new. And this conflict is inevitable because no one can fully enter a new chapter while still gripping the old one. When the soul decides you are ready to rise into a higher layer, life begins stripping away each mask, each compromise, each false connection, each limiting belief you once used to soothe yourself. And you feel as though everything is falling from your hands. But the truth is that nothing that belongs to you is leaving. Only what was never yours is dissolving. Collapse is only painful when you resist the loss, when you cling to what was never meant to accompany you into the next chapter. You are not tired because things are leaving. You are tired because you are fighting what needs to go. If you allow what must fall to fall, you will feel lighter. When you accept that collapse is the opening of a path, you see clearly that nothing is taken from you without purpose. What leaves in this stage may hurt, but it will never diminish you. It will only make you more true. And truth always takes you to where you need to stand, not where you are used to being. The most extraordinary thing is that in the middle of the collapse, you begin to notice something very clear. Everything is falling away in perfect order, as if life is clearing the stage for a completely new version of you, a version no longer shaped by fear, no longer limited by expectation, no longer controlled by old stories. That version is approaching and the universe is making space for it. Collapse is not the end chapter, it is the transition, and the soul guides you into it, not to strip you down, but to prepare you for what you did not know you were worthy of. Your task is not to hold everything together, but to allow what no longer belongs to fall away naturally, because only when the old ground breaks can the new ground rise beneath your feet. And that is the moment you begin to stand on the true frequency of who you are. There is a very quiet moment that holds more power than any explosion in your life. The moment when, after all the turbulence and the breaking and the collapse you have endured, something finally falls into its rightful place. There is no loud sound, no warning, no sign. Only a soft shift inside you, like the click of a lock opening, like the body breathing out after years of holding tension, like the mind stopping its escape and the soul stepping in to lead. This is the click that so many people search for their entire lives without knowing they are searching. You do not recognize it through excitement, but through peace. You do not feel it through a racing heart, but through a quiet current moving through your whole body. You cannot hear it, yet you know it has happened. When the click arrives, you no longer feel as if you are fighting life. You no longer feel the need to brace yourself. You no longer feel the pressure to keep everything in place, because you realize you are no longer being pushed by fear, but guided by truth. Before this, you had to work to stay calm, to stay balanced, to stay strong. But when the click happens, calm becomes your natural state. No forcing, no pretending, no effort. It simply exists. It feels as if you have stepped into a version of yourself you once believed was far away. When the click activates, your center shifts. You no longer stand on the edge of your life observing everything like someone on defense. You stand in the center. That center does not shake. It does not react. It does not follow temporary emotions. And when you stand there, everything around you begins to change, not because the world changes first, but because you change first. You begin to see clearly what belongs to you and what does not, what lifts your energy and what drains it, who truly walks with you and who only walked with the version you once performed. Before this, you kept wondering whether you were moving in the right direction. But when the click happens, you realize direction matters less than frequency. When you stand in your true frequency, the direction opens on its own. You feel a clarity as if someone wiped the dust from a mirror that once showed only blurred reflections. Now you see yourself clearly and nothing in that reflection frightens you anymore. You stand in truth and understand that truth never stood against you. When the click happens, your body becomes more sensitive yet more stable. Your heart opens wider yet becomes less fragile. Your mind becomes more aware yet less anxious. You begin saying no gently but firmly, saying yes clearly without needing to justify it. You no longer feel the need to explain yourself to anyone, not from arrogance, but from the understanding that peace does not need proof. One of the strongest signs of the click is that you no longer feel guilty for protecting your energy. You no longer feel ashamed for leaving a room that does not match you. You no longer fear losing someone just because you choose your truth. When the click happens, you understand that endings are not losses, but corrections in direction. Everything leaving has completed its role. Everything appearing arrives because it matches your new frequency. The movement of things falling away and appearing no longer scares you. It becomes something you observe with the quiet of someone who knows life is rearranging itself for your highest alignment. The click also changes your sense of time. Every moment feels deeper and more meaningful. Noise stops pulling you in. Old patterns no longer control your reactions. There is no need to prove anything. You live from the center, and that center makes you light without you trying to be light. This is the moment you realize that peace is not something earned through effort, but something touched when you stop running from yourself. The click is the return to your original frequency, the one you drifted away from while growing up. When that frequency locks into place, everything begins to flow effortlessly without resistance. Life stops being a battle and becomes a current. You no longer feel pulled by life, but feel yourself leading your life through presence instead of control. And in this moment, you understand that the journey home is not an escape from pain, but a return to your essence. The click only happens when you are honest enough with yourself, open enough, light enough, real enough. And once it happens, you cannot go back to who you were. You have crossed a subtle doorway no one hears, but everyone feels in your energy. This is the clearest sign that your journey home has reached the point where you begin living from your soul. When the click has happened and the inner center has been activated, something essential begins to form. You realize that you are no longer operating your life from fear or pleasing or unconscious compromise, but from a kind of honesty that is deep, quiet, and absolutely non-negotiable.
No matter how alone or different you feel, this journey of inner silence is not about losing yourself. It's about coming home to who you truly are. Embrace the separation, trust the quiet, because real freedom begins when you finally choose yourself. Let your soul guide you. Your authentic path starts here.